Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a Torah study. This week we study the portion of Bamidbar, the first portion of the book of Numbers. The beginning of the portion, God is counting the Jewish people by tribes, give them each a flag, a color, an image. Levi tribe is not counted. It is not part of that system because they are not situated around the Mishkan, the tabernacle, but closer to the Mishkan. Chapter 3, verse 1 begins to enumerate the amount and the families of Levi, as opposed to the other 11 or 12, because Menashe and Ephraim are 2, that are counted from 20 and up. Levi tribe is counted from 1 month. Says the verse 1, chapter 3.
3 or 2?
3. What? Chapter 3, verse 1. The following are the descendants of Aaron and Moshe on the day that God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. So, and immediately thereafter, Nadav and Avihu. Says Rashi, what do you mean the descendant of Aaron and Moshe on the day that God gave the Torah on Mount Sinai? Enumerating only Aaron's sons. Moshe's sons are not mentioned. Says Rashi, the verse mentions only the sons of Aaron. They are called the descendants of Moshe because Moshe taught them the Torah. This clarifies that anyone who teaches the Torah to another person's son is considered by Scripture as if he fathered them or him. So these are the descendants of Moshe and Aaron, Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Itamar. What do you mean Moshe and Aaron? Aaron had relationship with his wife and their children were born. Why do you give them another father? Says Rashi, because he taught them the Torah that he studied from God, and therefore we want to learn. God wants to remind us that if we teach someone Torah, we are considered their father, their spiritual father. But then we continue on. The second part, Rashi goes on. Rashi then continues his interpretation, beginning with a new entry. On the day that God spoke to Moshe, says Rashi, they became his descendants because he taught them what he had learned from the mouth of the Almighty. It appears superfluous, the Almighty. And from here, and he continues on to say that these children became his because he taught them everything he learned on Mount Sinai. Yes. Right. You're right. So, there are many points that the commentators ask. The first one is, didn't Moshe teach the rest of the Jewish people? We know the Seder Mishnah, the Gemara, the Medrash tells us that Moshe was teaching Aaron, teaching his sons, then the elders, then the Jewish people. Why? What's so unique about the sons of Aaron? And the commentators, Maskil David, Goraria, they say that he was taking a specific attention to those children, going through the details that he heard, not in general the rules that he did with all of the Jewish people, but in details. That's why Moshe is mentioned right next to Aaron, because of the special attention he paid them. Then, as the Rebbe, the second one, the day God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, Rashi says, from here we learn that he taught them everything he learned on Mount Sinai, and therefore they are considered his children. It's superfluous. It's a repeat of the same thing that's already mentioned just before. The Rebbe is asking many, many questions. The first question, the Rebbe says, it says that he taught them beyond the day that God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. Actually, it's impossible that that's the day he studied with him. It must have been about 4 months later, more than 4 months later, because he was busy going back for 40 days, came back another 40 days, came back another 40 days. So the first time he had an opportunity to teach them is after Yom Kippur, not on the 7th of Sivan, and as we celebrate Shabbat. So that's question number one. Number two, the Rebbe is asking, why does Rashi say it's considered his children because he was teaching them everything he studied at Mount Sinai? He should say he taught them Torah, teaching them Torah. That's what he studied with God. Why does Rashi goes to he taught them everything that he studied at Mount Sinai from God? And there's the third question that he says, what do you mean that he studied with God? That he heard from God. Rashi says he learned with them everything that he studied with God on Mount Sinai. Rashi should have said that he had heard from God.
At that point, God had given the Torah.
On that day, God gave the Torah. Rashi says, B'yom diber Hashem el Moshe, the day that God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. The Ten Commandments, the whole Torah, or whatever Hashem told him. So the Rebbe's first question was, must have been after Yom Kippur, then he learned that. Then why do you mean he studied with God? Say he heard from God. The third question I mentioned before, similarly, he was teaching the rest of Jewish people. But now, and the fourth and another question is, says the Rebbe, the first time he was teaching the Jewish people Torah was on the day God gave us the Torah. It's in Marah. In Marah, it was a camp somewhere that God gave them, that Moshe taught them Shabbat, Kibud Avraham, and Dinim. Honor your father and mother, and justice system, and Shabbat was given much earlier. In fact, says the Rebbe, Moshe was teaching the Jewish people Torah in Egypt. In Egypt, the mitzvah of circumcision, the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, the first of the month, the first month. So what do you mean B'yom, the day he has taught them Torah, the day God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai? So there are a few questions. Maybe I made a whole mix, but I'm going to summarize them. The first one, the Torah says, Eile, these are the chronicles, the descendants of Moshe and Aaron, and the day that God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. Rashi says twice that from here we learn that someone who teaches his friend's son Torah, Ben Chaveiroi, is considered like as if his father them. Where did Rashi took it? Because Moshe is attached. The word Moshe is added here. If you took out Moshe, you would say, these are the chronicles of Aaron. The second part, Rashi is explaining about the day God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai, because God wants to teach us that Moshe, Aaron's sons are attributed to Moshe. Why? Because he was teaching them everything he studied with God. So the first question, the Rebbe says, why Rashi goes twice about the same thing, that someone who is teaching Torah is considered like their father them. Second question is, what do you mean the day he heard on Mount Sinai? That's not the first time he was teaching them Torah. He was teaching them the Jewish people in general, way earlier, even in Egypt. The third one, what do you mean the day God gave him the Torah, he was teaching the Torah? It's impossible. It doesn't make sense that he started with them everything God was teaching him, because it would have happened after Yom Kippur, because he was busy going up and down, up and down. The fourth question that I was asking, what do you mean that he studied with God on Mount Sinai? Say, the Torah. He was teaching them the Torah. Fourth question or fifth question, what do you mean he studied from God? He heard from God. The next question is, he was teaching the rest of the Jewish people. All that the Rebbe is asking in different parts, but I'm making it together all as one. And I'm going to try to address the answer. Yes, Harry.
I can see here where Moshe's children, Moshe's children.
They're not mentioned here. They'll be mentioned later.
Thinking, teaching these, he's teaching everyone there.
So you have a question why Moshe's children are not mentioned, right? Because we're talking about Aaron's children, and because Aaron was older. Moshe's children will come soon. You understand? But if you talk about Aaron's children, God adds the word Moshe, and God says, on the day that God gave the Torah to Moshe. What?
Didn't Moshe's children come with Yitro after the giving?
Right, but he's their father. They should be a why?
I had Harry's same question.
Before he brought it before the beginning of the Torah.
No,
There is a dispute whether they were there for giving of Torah or not.
because he said,
The beginning of the parsha.
I know, but then there's something that says he saw it happen.
Here is, yes.
Could it be that at this time they were addressing the counting of those that were in service of the temple?
Yeah,
And
right.
that's the reason
From
why
a
they
1 month
mentioned
and on.
Aaron's kids.
But Moshe's kids were also serving. They were Levites. They had the same job. Moshe's descendants are mentioned, but they are mentioned just after Aaron's family. Because Moshe is younger.
Okay.
So you go in order of age.
Okay.
But why are you giving? So I asked you many questions. I don't want to repeat them. Here is the Rebbe's answer, a concentrated answer, and the Rebbe talks about other things. The Rebbe says, I don't understand. How is it possible to tell that someone has two fathers? Moshe and Aaron. It's impossible. You cannot have another human being to become my father. You can adopt me, but you cannot become my father. And that's what Rashi wants to address. The Torah wants to answer it by saying the day that God gave Moshe the Torah and what Moshe studied from God. So the first answer, on a side note, the Rebbe says, the rest of the Jewish people Moshe was teaching also, they're not his children. You know why? Because he was obligated to do it. When you hired someone to do something, he does not get credit for it. Like the Rebbe brings examples in the Torah that Moshe speaks on behalf of God, speaking as if he is doing it. V'natati et ototai be'eretz Mitzrayim. I will put my signs in Egypt. It's God. It's a tribute of God. So teaching the Torah to the rest of the people, that's a contract between God and Moshe. And therefore, whatever he did does not give him the credit to become their father. Aaron's son, it says that he studied with them everything he studied with God on Mount Sinai. Meaning, he took extra attention to teach them the details to specific parts. And therefore, he did, as we call it in Hebrew, lifnim mishur hasadin, way above the call of duty. And by doing so, now he gets the credit for it. So in that way, he is different. The sons of Aaron are much different. They are connected to Moshe just because of the extra attention he paid them. Does that answer that question, Harry? Now says the Rebbe, why does it also say, B'yom diber Hashem el Moshe b'Har Sinai, the day God spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai? Says the Rebbe, when God came down to Moshe and told him that I am going to come and speak and make a covenant with the Jewish people, God had made a change in this physical universe. He picked the Jewish people from among all nations and say to them what? V'atem tiyu li mamlechet koyanim v'goy kodesh. You are becoming my son. God has affected nature. And a Jewish person, his body is equal to all the other human beings, but he's completely different. He's a child of God. B'ni b'chori Israel, my firstborn son. So you may have many, many non-Jews, Gentiles, who serve God, who please God. You had Noah. Later on, you'll have many, many holy people. Jethro is an example. Ruth before she converted. but once they become part of Jewish people, it will affect their very essence. It will make them a new entity. Do you understand that? Yes, Ali. Says the Rebbe, that's what the Torah wants to teach us. When someone goes and study Torah and gives the Torah to his friend's son, not just to his friend's sons, and there is something the Rebbe explained why, his friend's son, he actually acquire him as a spiritual son. Just like you have a materialistic physical son, you can have a spiritual son. By what? By doing the extra mile, not what you are obligated to do, but going above and beyond. Now it is going to be the father. That's why Rashi says that when he taught the sons of Aaron Torah that he studied on Mount Sinai, it's considered as if he fathered them, ke'ilu yaldo. It doesn't say that he is going to be the father, but it says like he gave birth to them. Giving birth, says the Rebbe, is a one-time event. It's not a continuous, you don't give birth all the time. A physical father, once the child is born, is going to be his child always. Says the Rebbe, the same is with a spiritual sense. When you connect someone to God through Torah, by going the extra mile and bonding them with God, he is becoming my child forever, just like giving birth in a physical sense, spiritually. That's why the Torah tells us, Beyom, in the day that God gave the Torah on Mount Sinai. Moshe was teaching the Jewish people Torah before and after. Moshe was studying with Aaron's son maybe the other days later. But from the fact that he learned that during the giving of the Torah, God has adopted us as his children, significantly different than what was before, we learn that when someone takes care and goes beyond the call of duty and teaches Torah to connect and bond someone to God, he's considered as if he fathered them. So now the child is moving to another country, or the spiritual father goes to be busy with other people, the connection is established and he is becoming their father. Harry, did you understand that?
Good question. I assume that he did this with Aaron's children before, earlier.
Yeah, but God did not teach him all the details until Mount Sinai. Only on Mount Sinai, God was spending time with him. That's why the Torah does not say what he heard, but what he studied, because he had to give them something extra that he was not obligated. Everything he heard is the Ten Commandments, or the commandments in general. That he gave all the Jewish people. But it's not considered their father, and simply because he was obligated to do it. It's called Midat Shurat Adin. But the sons of Aaron, Milifnim Shurat Adin, everything he studied with God, way, way above and beyond. So even though he was teaching the Jewish people before, after doing, but Aaron's sons, when he was teaching them, he was teaching them that which he studied on Mount Sinai. And for that, he fathered them. That's why the Torah, Rashi says, Melamed sheshkulim. They are equally attributed, giving credit as the fathers of Aaron's sons, which is phenomenal. Says Rashi, Moshe and Aaron share fatherhood. Melamed sheshkulim. In other words, when you teach someone above and beyond the call of duty, you go out of your way to connect someone to God, you are becoming just like a physical father. And that, where did Moshe took it? The Torah says, B'yom diber Hashem el Moshe b'Har Sinai, the day that spoke to Moshe on Mount Sinai. Just like on Mount Sinai, God became our father, and God changed reality, the physical universe. A human being that became Jewish is totally different breed, different beast. The same applies to someone who takes care of sitting someone's son, because he becomes a father equally like the physical father. Yes, Harry.
So I realize that women are obligated as men are, but how come we hear nothing about Miriam and her?
I do not think that there is a distinction in this regard between men and women.
Okay, so
I was thinking about it. I do not have any sources, but I can guarantee you that when a mother or a female goes and connects another human being to God through the study of Torah, making them connected to God, they get the full credit as becoming their mother. No doubt in my mind. Because Miriam didn't hear the Torah from God. It's Moshe who stood on Mount Sinai. Moshe was receiving everything.
But then Aaron is mentioned, and then you know,
Oh, Miriam, because she married Caleb ben Yehuda, she became part of the tribe of Judah. You're mixing two different topics. I'm not talking about the lineage now. I'm talking about the fact that when we talk about the children of Aaron, Moshe is mentioned. Very unusual. Says Rashi, Melamed Shishkulim. They are both fathered because everything is studied, not heard, studied with God. On Mount Sinai, he was teaching them. Asked the Rebbe, what do you mean studied on Mount Sinai? Heard. What do you mean on Mount Sinai? He studied. He was teaching the Jewish people too. He was teaching them before Mount Sinai. Actually, starting with the sons must have been 4 months later, 120 days later. Says the Rebbe, but for Mount Sinai, he took it that they can change reality and become a father. Why is it important? Says the Rebbe, that's why it says that Kol ha'omer davar b'shem omroi. Anytime you relay a teaching with the name of the author, of the one who taught you that, Mevi geula la'olam, you bring redemption to the universe. How do we know that? The Mishnah in Ethics of Our Father says, Shenema, as it's written in this book of Esther, Vatoimer Esther lamelech b'shem Mordechai. There were a pair of guards by the gate that plotted to kill Achashverosh, the king. Mordechai spoke their language. They didn't know he understands. And when he heard their plot with poisoning the food, he went and told Esther. When Esther told him about the plot, she said, Mordechai told me. And in the book of the Chronicles of the life of that king was written Mordechai. Later on, when he couldn't sleep, there was no Twitter, there was no YouTube. So he opened up his book of Chronicles. He read the story of Mordechai. He says, what did I ever rewarded him? And that's the beginning of the fall of Haman, when he made him to carry him around on a horse. The start, it's a slippery slope. When you fall before the Jews, hopefully in Iran we'll see it too. When you start falling, it's a complete fall. There is no stop in the middle. There is nothing to hold. Says the Mishnah, anybody who relay a teaching of Torah in the name of its author brings geula. Says the Rebbe, now we can understand why is it so important. When I say it because I heard it from my teacher, and my teacher says that he heard it from his teacher, I'm connecting that Torah lesson all the way back, 1 generation back and back and back to Moshe, to God himself. Now we can understand why when I teach someone Torah and I take extra attention and I teach them Torah with the name of the authors, when I study Gemara, I do not skip the name. Omar Rav Zuid b'shem Rav Papa b'shem Rav Tarfon b'shem. And some say, what happens is, I connect the person directly to Mount Sinai. Just like on Mount Sinai, God took us as children and make us, He is our Father, different than all other children in the universe. When I teach you Torah and I relate to you in the name, I heard it from the Rebbe heard it from whoever, and he heard it from Rambam, and he heard it all the way to Rabbi Tarfon. It goes back to Moshe. It traced back to Moshe. Now we understand why it changes.
Thank you, Daddy.
Another one. That's why the Torah we read, it says, Kiem chayenu ve'orech yameinu. This is our life. Why is it our life, says the Rebbe? Because when you study the Torah and connect to its authors, and that connects you to the previous generation authors and the previous authors, it's a chain that goes back when? To the giving of Torah. The giving of Torah gave us life. That's when it starts. Says the Rebbe, there is something else. And this is a little deeper. It says, Rashi says, anyone who teaches his son Torah, Moshe was teaching Aaron's son's Torah that he studied mipi hagvura. Gvura is translated as Almighty. Almighty. Why does it say mipi hagvura? It should say mipi Hashem, mipi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from the Holy One, from God. What do you mean mipi agvura? Says the Rebbe, the idea of giving birth is known as gvura because it's a very, very dangerous time for the mother. The mother, when giving birth, is closer to heaven than to earth. In addition, we also learn that the geula, the redemption, is considered a birth, giving birth. That's why we have the pain of redemption, right? Isurei hageula. Preparation for the redemption is going through Gog Magog, or the different challenges, as the previous Rebbe would say, the darkness thickens just before the light starts. In other words, Geula comes right after great severity and strictness. Some say after the Holocaust, Gog Magog. The Rebbe would say, sometimes the choshech, the darkness of the universe, is so thick that you can touch it. And that's when you know redemption is about to happen. That's why the darkness, the plague of darkness, came just before the firstborn, because the thickness of darkness is what will bring you the bright light. In other words, Gevura is the process that will create redemption, says the Rebbe. That's why he uses the word mipi hagvura, from Almighty. Almighty is from the root of Gibor or Gvura. Gvura is the attribute of strictness. In other words, how do I bring two things the way I understand? How do I become a father to somebody? Giving birth. Rashi says, like giving birth to that child. Giving birth is Gevura. It's coming when I teach him what I studied on Mount Sinai. That's why when you say something in the name of its author, you bring Geula. You're giving birth to the redemption, because it's the same thing. Moshe, whatever he studied with the Gevura, he related to the sons of Aaron. What did I learn from all that? I hope it wasn't that much confusing. We learned from here that one word is not superfluous. Eile toldot, Moshe and Aaron. These are the Rebbe says that's a single word, Moshe. If you took out that word, everything will be fine. Rashi comes to teach us that a person, and the Rebbe says, you can say, maybe it's unique to Moshe, because Moshe was very special. Says the Rebbe, no. God would put it in the Torah just for us to learn. Just like Moshe, if he took care and put the efforts to raise someone with the knowledge, even though they got from Aaron so much, but nobody studied with God like Moshe, and he took care of them in that way. We have the ability to do the same by mentioning the author's name, by realizing we become a father to that child, to that individual, just like a real father. That's why it says, Kol HaMelamed es ben Chaveroi, the son of his friend, not Kol HaMelamed es Chaveroi, not like a friend, the son of his friend. The Torah uses the example of the sons of Aaron, because now it's two brothers, but they are two fathers to the same child. I hope I made myself clear, and I want to wish everybody a good Shabbat.
Thank you, Rabbi.
He spoke with children